She thought her home was perfect, flawless, untouchable, safe. But one afternoon, everything shattered. The wealthy wife walked into her lavish living room, only to find a sight that froze her in place. Her black maid, arms wrapped tightly around her disabled daughter. At first glance, it looked like betrayal, like boundaries had been crossed. But what she was about to uncover wasn't scandal. It was something far more shocking, something that would turn her world upside down. What could possibly drive a maid to risk everything in that single moment? In a mansion on the edge of the city, life looked flawless from the outside. Expensive cars lined the driveway. Glass chandeliers glistened in every room, and silence floated through polished marble halls. For the billionaire's wife, this was her sanctuary, a place where appearances mattered more than anything else. She guarded her reputation fiercely, ensuring every detail of her household projected wealth, order, and control. Working quietly in the shadows was the maid, a black woman whose presence was tolerated but never fully respected. She kept her head down, cleaning, folding, serving. To the wife, she was simply the help, to the world invisible. But to the little girl in the wheelchair, the daughter who lived in a bubble of isolation, this woman was different. She was warmth. She was patience. She was a friend in a house that often felt cold. The daughter's disability had built walls around her young life. She rarely saw children her age, rarely felt the laughter of companionship. Her mother's love was real, yet distant, overshadowed by the pressure of wealth, events, and status. The maid was the only one who treated her as if she wasn't fragile glass. She talked to her, comforted her, reminded her that she was more than her wheelchair. But boundaries in this house were unspoken, and loyalty was measured in silence. The wife believed she knew everything happening under her roof. She believed her family was safe, her rules unchallenged. Until one afternoon, when she walked in unannounced and saw something she was never meant to see. It began as an ordinary day. The maid had finished her morning duties and was in the living room, dusting the tall shelves where family portraits proudly displayed generations of wealth. The daughter was nearby, gazing at the window where sunlight danced across the curtains. Then the girl's voice broke the silence. "Can you sit with me for a while?" The maid hesitated. It wasn't her place to sit, to linger, to blur the lines between servant and family. But the girl's pleading eyes softened her resolve. She placed the duster down, walked over, and knelt by the wheelchair. What began as small talk turned into something deeper. The child spoke of loneliness, of feeling invisible in her own home, of wishing someone cared about her, not her condition, not her disability, but her. Moved by the girl's words, the maid gently wrapped her arms around her. It was a simple gesture, human, kind, instinctive. But in a house where lines of race, class, and status were drawn so sharply, it was dangerous. And then the door opened. The wife stood frozen in the doorway, her expensive heels clicking against the marble floor as she stepped inside. Her eyes narrowed at the sight before her. Her maid, holding her daughter as if she were more than an employee. The air thickened with unspoken judgment. Whispers began later that day among neighbors, among the wife's wealthy circle of friends. Why was she so close to the maid? What does she think she's doing? Does she even know what goes on in her own house? Rumors twisted kindness into suspicion. The wife confronted the maid with cold authority, her voice sharp, accusing. To her, this wasn't an act of compassion, it was an intrusion, an overstep, a servant daring to believe she belonged. The maid, trembling, could not explain in words strong enough to break. Through centuries of prejudice and the iron grip of social hierarchy, the tension grew unbearable. Every glance, every silence in the mansion dripped with suspicion. The daughter's pleas to defend the maid were drowned by the wife's fears of scandal. The maid stood at the edge of losing everything, her job, her dignity, even her freedom, because of one embrace. But beneath the surface lay a truth the wife had never considered, a truth that would soon explode into the open and leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about loyalty, love, and humanity. The breaking point came one stormy evening. The wife, determined to protect her image, demanded the maid pack her things and leave before sunrise. Her voice was ice, her decision final. The daughter cried out, her voice shaking with desperation. begging her mother to stop. But the wife's pride was louder. As the maid gathered her belongings, the daughter wheeled herself into the center of the room, tears streaming down her face. And then, with trembling words, she revealed the secret her mother never knew. She confessed that the maid had been the only one keeping her alive, not just emotionally, but physically. In moments of medical crisis, when the wife was away at lavish events, it was the maid who stayed by her side. It was the maid who noticed the early signs of her seizures, who had saved her life more than once by acting quickly. The wife's face drained of color. The realization hit her with crushing force. The embrace she had condemned wasn't an act of betrayal. It was an act of love. A love her own fear, distance, and obsession with status had blinded her to. For the first time, the wife truly saw the maid, not as the help, not as a shadow in her house, but as a human being who had given more to her daughter than wealth ever could. Silence filled the room as the storm outside raged on. The wife's pride crumbled beneath the weight of truth. She looked at her daughter, her fragile, brave child, and then at the maid, whose eyes carried both fear and unshaken compassion. The decision she had been so sure of now seemed shameful. Slowly, the wife lowered her voice, whispering words that felt foreign on her tongue. "Thank you." For the first time, gratitude overcame suspicion. In the days that followed, the mansion felt different. The maid was no longer just a silent presence in the background. She was acknowledged, respected, and allowed the space she had always deserved. The daughter smiled more, no longer fearing that the one person who understood her might disappear. But for the wife, the experience left a deeper scar. She had nearly destroyed the one bond that truly healed her daughter, not because of wrongdoing, but because of prejudice. It forced her to confront the harsh truth that racism isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's subtle, lurking in suspicion, in cold stares, in the refusal to see someone as fully human. The story didn't end with a perfect family or a grand apology, but with a change of heart, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful truths come from the people we overlook. And so the question remains, how many more lives, how many more children must suffer before society finally learns to see past race, past status, and past prejudice, and recognize the humanity standing right in front of us?